Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the South and West Plan panel. My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being streamed, it's live streamed on the City Council YouTube channel, so that members of the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. South and West Plan panels deal with applications from South, Northwest, and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public, and council officers to help members to decide on their decision on the application. Before we start, could I ask members to please introduce themselves? I know officers is across the table, and after our members introduce, if officers across could just come forward and introduce yourself also. I'll start on my left, as it says, I'm Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Carol Cunningham, team leader for Northwest team.
Good afternoon, Phil Ward, team leader, landscape, heritage and ecology.
Good afternoon, Councillor David Jenkins, Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Paul Ray, Huntlet and Riverside Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Denise Reagan, Berman Soss and Richmond Hill Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Sharon Burt, Middleton Park Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moortown Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Dan Cohen from the Old Woodley Ward, subbing today for Councillor Smith.
Hello, everyone. Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Colin Campbell.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlan Wharfdale Ward.
Andy Booth, clerk to the panel.
Nikki Dio, legal advisor to the panel.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Steve Butler, Group Manager and Lead Officer for South and West Plans Panel. Because also add that when it comes to officers' questions, we'll bring forward John Booth from Highways and Susie Watson from Development Management as well. Thank you.
Could I ask the officers that sit across if you could just come and introduce yourselves? Could one stand up and, what did you? Okay. It's okay, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Cohen. Welcome to our meeting. Should we move on to item 1? Over to you, Handy.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, with no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the public. Under item number 3, there are no late items of business today. Moving on to agenda item 4, could I ask members if they've got any interest to declare?
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually a member of Rawdon Parish Council, and Rawdon Parish Council have responded against this application. I'd just like to let councillors know that I was not during that council meeting, Rawdon Parish Council, when this was discussed specifically so that I can give an unbiased, unprejudiced opinion today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, agenda item number 5, we've got apologies from Councillors Smith and Finnegan, and we've got Councillor Cohen present as substitute today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We move on to item 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of November. Do member accept the minutes?
Move on, Chair.
Thank you. I was going to say the true record, you didn't give me a chance. Should we go page by page? Yes, any members have any comment? Page 7?
Happy to second, Chair, that we move.
The minute was, all members agreed with that? Lovely, thank you. Matters arising from the minutes? Any matters arising? No? Thank you. We'll now move to item 7, application for change of use of an alternative Micklefield House, new road site in Rawdon. Could I call on the officer, Carol Cunningham, to present the application?
Thank you, Chair. This scheme is the conversion of a Grade 2 listed building, which is also within the Rawdon Littlemore Conservation Area. And the scheme's convert it from offices to 8 apartment, all of which will be 2-bed, except for one, which is 3-bed. The scheme was brought to members in March and was deferred due to further discussion with regard to the design and the materials of the first floor extension and to provide more detail on conditions. The application was also subject to a site visit this morning. Since the papers were published, we've had a number of representations that have been submitted. Councillor Wadsworth has commented stating that he has not seen any significant improvement in the plans, but would like to raise an additional concern about parking. As a result of the proposed residence parking, there will be less space for visitors to Micklefield Park, displacing parking onto New Roadside, which doesn't have restrictions. He suggests an additional condition for the applicant to pay the funds for a permit parking scheme for the affected residents on New Roadside. Councillor Nash has objected again, but she raises no issues than she's already raised previously and are included in her objection in the report. We have 2 further objections which are stating there is not one supporter of the scheme and some 60 objectors to it. In terms of the Conservation Officer's comments, they are no way fully supportive and they suggest an optimum outcome. Surely this is recommending refusal. The justification for the second story is commercial, which is an unacceptable planning reason. There are no architect drawings submitted as part of the application, so panel cannot consider it properly and it should be refused on this ground alone. If the second floor was removed and the ground floor finished in traditional materials, it would meet support of the local community. And the second story glass extension is entirely inappropriate in the conservation area and on a listed building. We've also had a submission made on behalf of the Airborough Civic Society, who have commissioned a heritage company to assess the application, focusing on the contrasting new build element. In terms of the application, they state that the Victorian Conservatory was placed in the 1960s with a flat-roofed extension, which was low scale, and this was to protect the landmark appearance of Mickledale House from the park. You have to acknowledge that this is their views. The low extension already detracts from the appearance of the main house, and the proposal is to build on top of this, which will have great harm to the building. The proposal will introduce a feature that almost reaches the eave line of the existing house, with a projection in front of the original principal facade at first floor level. It will be highly dominant and nearly intrusion on a principal and highly important facade. And the materials bear no contextual relationship to the building or the area. No information has been submitted regarding viability, and whilst there are public benefits, these are already compensated by the fact the building will be subdivided and the proposed harm is not outweighed by modest benefits. Except for the information submitted by Councillor Wadsworth on parking, which I'll deal with later, the information submitted from the objectors has been assessed by officers, and it is our view that the issues within the heritage report submitted and the further objection comments have not raised any new issues or any more material considerations that have already been covered in the report in front of you. Now, I'll now move on to the scheme. So if I can have slide 3, please, or next slide. This is an aerial photograph showing you the scheme in question, which some of you saw today. The front of the building is facing towards the car park, which is at the lower part of the area you've got there in front of you. You can see there's a park to the left-hand side and a play park almost to the right. No. The access will be off the existing access, which is on New Roadside. And I think on this aerial photograph, one of the things I want you to look at is the fact that there is a flat roofed extension, which is close to the play area at the northern part. Can I have the next slide, please? This one's just showing you the other side. This is the rear of the building. You've got the existing tower, the rear there, and the existing flat roofed extension that you can see. The park that you can see there belongs to the library, and the park won't form part of this scheme. Can I have the next slide, please? This is showing you the front elevation as it is at the moment. The ramp that is there will be removed. There will be an element of grass that will be removed from part of the scheme. Brilliant, thank you. See if I can get to it. So yeah, there will be some grass that will be moved from the front here to increase the parking to the front. This ramp will be removed. These windows will be changed on the front, but other than that, the vast majority of that front elevation will stay as it is at the moment. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the side elevation. This tree will remain and the bin store will go in this area here. Can I have the next one? This is just showing you that area again where the bin stores will go in this area here. Can I have the next one, please? This is the rear of the building. This grassed area here forms the amenity space for the development. The red edge is quite tight around the building. This will be the only amenity space for the development, but seeing as we have a park to the rear and we're restoring a historic listed building, officers consider that the lack of amenity space to the scheme is acceptable in this instance. This ramp will be removed. This will be removed. You can see the tower there, which I've been talking about. Can I have the next slide, please? This again is another one at the rear. You've got, this is going to all be removed, we've seen. This here, we saw inside today, is a very stained glass window, which has received some damage, but will be restored as part of the development. And the members who were on site today saw the inside of that. Can we have the next one, please? And the next one, actually, because there's a bit repeating now. This is the tower. This would be the main entrance to flat 1, which is the one that's going to have the extension on it. This is the flat roofed existing extension at the moment, which will have the extension above. Can I have the next one, please? This is just showing you the tower again, and the flat roof that will have the extension above it. The next one, please. And that's just showing you a closer version of it. These will all be blocked up. This will all be clad in the mirror cladding that we're going to show you in a minute. This doesn't form part of the application site, so the boundary for the application is here. The next one, please. We move round to the rear of the building. Well, it's not the rear, it's the side of the building, but it has some very important architectural features on it, except for this potentially this 1960s extension that's there at the moment. You can look on the tower when you see the extension that's going to go on, it goes on here. So it's no higher than the eaves and it's not covering up any windows or features on the actual tower itself. Can I have the next slide, please? Part of the scheme also involves digging out of part of the area to provide some rooms in the basement. There will be one flat in the basement and then there will be the bedrooms to flat 1, which has the extension in the basement area. And it will go to here. So all this area here will be dug out. This will be the retaining wall there and it will have railings above. All that land beyond is outside of the application site. And then the next one, please. That's just showing you the other side of the area of what will be dug out to form the basement flat. This area here that will all be dug out will become the private amenity space for that basement flat only. So they will have a courtyard here to the front with this retaining wall and railings. Can I have the next one, please? And that's again just showing you that the retaining wall will be here and this area belongs to the park. The next one, please. This is the existing site plan. So as I've said to you previously, you can see that the red edge is quite tight on the site. So this is where the retaining wall will go. The dig out will be here. That's the flat roofed extension that currently exists and the parking to the front. The next one, please. And this is showing you the proposed site plan, which is probably what I've just described on the previous one, but in more detail, the parking to the front, which meets the SPD on parking. You've got the amenity space to the side here with the bin store, the private garden for that basement flat I've talked about, and then the flat roof extension that exists now. The next slide, please. I'll quickly go through these elevations, but this is the elevation that's on the western side, which is showing you the flat roof there and the tower. I won't linger on that because you've seen the photos. Can next one, please. and that's showing you the other side of it as it exists at the moment with the tower here and the flat roof. But they're very, very detailed, these drawings, so I think the images show you a better idea of what's going to happen. I'll have the next one. This is showing you the proposed elevations on the other side. There's very little changes on there. You can see that horrible porch has been removed. Next one, please. And that's not come out very well, but that's what the front elevation will look like, with the new window and door being the only change and the removal of the ramp. Next one, please. I wanted to explain to you the floor plans, really, to explain the need for the extension on the existing flat roof. So flat one, this is the tower here that I've talked about, and flat one gains entrance through this tower. They have 2 bedrooms in the basement, but they have their main living area in that existing flat roof that happens at the moment. If we move on to the next.
Sorry, Chair. I can't find that on my list of.
I think I added, when I was off last week, when I came back to work, I added the ground floor and the first floor plans onto the presentation. But I did give you a ground floor and first floor plan in.
Certainly you did.
This site, on site
it's
this
sitting
morning.
in the car now, even as we speak. So I can't actually see that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Have you got one there for him? We've got some there for him. It's that one, yes. When I came to do the presentation, I thought it was important, even though it hadn't been included in your packages, to just talk you through this as to why the extension's needed, really, on that flat one part of the scheme, which is in this area here. So this will be their living accommodation. We went in the tower today, as you've seen, and this is the tower here where it will gain access through into the ground floor. If we go on to the next slide, which shows the extension, and it's linked in with the tower, and it has an ensuite in it as well. If we didn't have the extension there, it would leave one, a small flat, and secondly, it would leave the tower not being used. And it would then become a maintenance who will have control of it, who would look after it. So it's an important. I thought the floor plans just gave you the picture, really, as to why the extension has come about. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've gone through the floor plans with you. So this shows the extension now. This is the existing flat roof extension that you've seen before. This is the proposed extension on top of it. There will be mirrored materials on there, which will constantly change due to the sky colour, the clouds. It will show the vegetation. It's hard to depict exactly what will be in those mirrors when you see it, but that just gives you a representation of where it goes on the building. You can also see here the railings that will go on the development to the front. Can I have the next one, please? These are just showing you, again, the actual extension. If you look in its setting, it is set back and it will be curved round. So it doesn't actually come any further forward than this principal elevation there at the moment. In fact, quite a bit of it, it's set back. Can I have the next one? That's just showing you from the front, so you get an idea of it. As again, you can see it comes as high as the eaves, and it doesn't cover up anything on the tower. The next one, please. That's showing it you from the park area, so you can see again that it doesn't actually cover up any of the features that are on the existing building. The next one, please. And that's showing you it from the side path. At the side, you can see again where it fits in with the existing building. I've got a few more images that show you where this has been used in other places. So can I have the next? Oh, that's just showing you how it is at the moment and how it will be constructed. So you can, sorry, can I have slide 31? Yeah. So you can see it only comes slightly forward of the existing. The majority of it will curve back, and it does have a nice balcony area for the occupiers of number one. And you can also see on this the steps going down and that area to the front courtyard for the basement. The next one, please. That's just another view of the extension in its setting. This is just showing you what can happen when you have a building with mirrors on it and what it reflects. It just reflects what's around it. The next one, again, just gives you an idea of what a mirrored building with a window in it would look like. The next one I think is a repeat, so just ignore that one. And then this last slide, this one's in York. This one is not an actual mirror, but it's actually a very highly reflective glass. And as you can see from this image, it shows you all the nice listed buildings and attractive buildings on the opposite side of the road reflecting in the actual building itself. I'll just briefly go on to the main issues. I mean, we consider that the principle is acceptable and it will address ongoing maintenance issues and contribute to the viability of the area. In terms of the listed building, there will be changes to the building, which I've already explained. There will be the evacuation to allow the creation of the basement flat with its own entrance and full height windows and a small courtyard garden. These works will generally be screened by the existing terrace wall, which will have railings attached. The major and most controversial part of the scheme is the extension above the existing flat roof, which we've mirrored along with the existing extension below. Officers accept that this is a very finely balanced recommendation to members. The proposed extension to the first floor doesn't cover any existing architectural features on the building, and its curved nature ensures that the majority of the extension, it sits behind the main elevation and it remains subservient to the existing building. The mirrored material will reflect the surroundings and will be a one material being used in a modern and architectural way. It is a design-led approach which responds to policy P11 of the core strategy, which encourages innovative design in historic settings. The proposed designs as offices and materials do not harm the existing building, and the design provides a modern architectural response to the special character of the listed building, and it also helps to preserve the conservation area. In terms of residential amenity, all the apartments comply with policy H9 of the core strategy in terms of their overall size. In terms of parking, there will be 16 car parking spaces, all served with electrical charging points, plus a cycle store for one cycle per flat. Councillor Wadsworth comments earlier commented that the current, in terms of him wanting a TRO on New Roadside. What we would say to that is that the current use is offices, which generates more need for parking than the proposed residential use. And the car parking provided does comply with the parking SPD. In terms of his request for a residence parking scheme, it would need to meet 3-tier criteria, all of which need to be met. And in this case, none of them meet any of the 3-tier criteria. Further, the current parking restrictions directly outside the site, as we saw today, are 8 AM to 6 PM, Monday to Saturday, and parking allowed in the evenings and the Saturday. And the actual restriction, when we looked at the signs there, said that people could actually park there for up to 4 hours during that time period anyway. Finally, the planning balance. Whilst we've received objections from Leeds Civic Trust, Rawdon Parish Council, Airborough Civic Society, the Victorian Society, among other, their objections have principally concentrated on the extension and the mirrored finish to this and the projection below. Heritage England have chose not to comment on the scheme and have referred it to our own officers for comment. As officers, we need to focus on the whole package and all of the material considerations. The proposal brings back a listed building into use, which has been vacant for a few years and has so far retained all its important features, but has suffered vandalism despite efforts to secure it. These will all be restored and retained as part of the development. The extension is required to ensure that the tower has a viable use and is maintained as part of one of the flats and not left with any ownership or maintenance issues. The mirrored material is an architectural feature which contrasts with the main building and will form a new chapter in the building's history. Officers recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We have Richard Taylor and Clive Wood, who in attendance and willing to speak against the application. Could I ask you both to have a seat? Thank you. Between you both, you've got 4 minutes, so it's 2 minutes each. And Clive, you've asked to speak first, so could you please go ahead? Okay, we'll.
Can you hear me all right? My name is Clive Woods, Chair of Airbus Civic Society. There is no support and over 65 objections from local people to this extension. From Leeds Civic Trust, the Council's Heritage Champion, VicSoc, the Parish Council and our Civic Society. Can they all be wrong? Has the applicant read the comments? Is certainly not acted on them. Over 2 years, on 4 occasions, the new images keep 2 stories. The solution is to have 7 flats, not 8, of course. The applicant says that many historic buildings have such additions. We've seen an example just now, but that actually was on a new building, which fine. Not on a listed building though. In March, the plans panel, it was said that a meeting of the developer, planning officers, parish council and ourselves could resolve this. Our councillor tried to arrange one, but it was refused. A first floor annex fails planning rules and law. This is verified by that independent conservation expert whose report you've taken extracts from. But I quote, the proposed extension would dominate Micklefield House within the park. Oh, that's my 2 minutes. All right. Thank you.
My name is Richard Taylor, and I became involved in this as I did with the Edinburgh Neighbourhood Development Forum in preserving the green belt, because what was then being proposed was wrong for our community. I'm a volunteer at the adjacent Rawdon Library. I've tried to put myself in your shoes. It must be nearly impossible to completely blank out your desire to dispose of this building at an attractive price without further delay. The principal issue is, why would the panel want to approve a first floor extension when none previously existed? It's a listed building in a conservation area. Proposal fails to conform to planning rules. Despite requests for drawing elevations, none have been provided on which you can base a decision. It's claimed the project is unviable without the first floor extension. No evidence is presented. It was also claimed unviable last March. There are 2 possibilities for the headline in the local paper and media. Firstly, plans panel preserve the unique Micklefield House by supporting the unanimous views of the community and independent conservation consultant. The applicant has been encouraged to resubmit, should he wish, without the first floor extension. The community wishes to thank the panel. Or, Plans Panel councillors approve the application to ruin the listed Micklefield House by agreeing to the addition of an obtrusive glass extension to this unique building. This has been described as a carbuncle by many of the local objectors and will overlook the park and children's playground. The community now has 3 months to reluctantly decide whether to again raise funds to take this decision to judicial review, as they did successfully with the ANDF Greenbelt Review. In the interim and during a review, no work can be started. Thank you.
Thank you both. Are there any? Councillor Campbell?
Can I just get clear in my mind? Are you saying the community do not support the principle of conversion to residential, or simply they don't particularly like the extension?
It is purely the extension. It's always purely the second floor of the first floor extension they don't like. They would support. So if this came back, I believe, with the existing building perhaps faced with stone, I think you get unanimous support.
We accept that it's a good use of the building. It's just the extension that is unacceptable. That extra story just makes it unacceptable. Hence, I think 7 flats rather than 8 is the solution. But then we'd be fully supportive. We obviously, it's a key building in the area and we want it back in use. And we want, I mean, empty buildings are really bad news, aren't they?
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. The planning officer has been referring to the building, referencing front and back, but where the white porch is at the moment, opposite the library, I believe that's been used as the front of the building for a long time. Do you know how long it's been since the building has been reversed in that way? Because I think it's a little bit unfair to say the front of the building when really what the planning officers are calling the front is the part that's away from the public, that isn't seen by general people generally using the library and going to the park.
It's a bit confusing, isn't it? I mean, where the car parking was the old front entrance. Presumably carriages pulled in there in Victorian times. But then in front of it, of course, the house is raised up on a terrace overlooking what were their gardens. Round the back was a one-stop shop entrance. So I think the main entrance was always at the front where the car parking is. And then, I don't know, 15 years ago, a one-stop shop was put on the back, but I assume that was always the back.
But am I right in assuming that where the white porch is, where the one-stop shop is what people would naturally think was the front, because that's the part they see most regularly?
It depends. If you were going to when it was council offices, a lot of the departments were around the other side. So, I mean, I think the important thing is the view from people. Now it's a public park. Lots of people use it. And it's that view from the playground area, the tennis courts, that play area that is so important. And I think that's why so many people find this objectionable.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned in your presentations, both of you, that you didn't think this application met planning law. I'm just interested to know from yourselves which laws or rules you think it doesn't meet.
Well, our consultant, because we felt we needed an expert because of this had gone on for so long, said it was indirect, it's harmful to a listed building, and listed buildings should be protected, of course. Certainly, so I quote, the result would be very harmful development in direct conflict with both the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990, the NPPF and Leeds City Council's own planning guidance. So it's about protecting a listed building, but you also protect buildings, of course, in a conservation area. That's why you have listed buildings and conservation areas. There'd be no point if you just allowed anything. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's just, I was looking for the specific area of the law because they're really material facts. And I just wondered perhaps if
Councillor Burke, we've got conservation officer here, and I'm sure we are coming up to officers soon. So I'm sure I will answer that question for you. Is that okay? Councillor Jenkins.
Yes. Do you know why the developers refused to have the meeting with you?
Well, Councillor Wadsworth tried to arrange it, and he reported back to me that it had been refused. I know no more.
Thank you, Chair. Could I also let councillors know that the developers did not get in touch with Rawdon Parish Council either. Our clerk would have let me know if that was the case, because I am actually chair of the planning subcommittee. Excuse me, the planning subcommittee. So I don't know what Councillor Wadsworth asked them to do, but they certainly didn't naturally come back to the Rawdon Parish Council either.
I take it you'll be speaking to Carol or Steve. Do you want to answer these two questions before we come?
Well, Chair, to the best of my knowledge, we had no approach either as officers for such a meeting from Councillor Wadsworth.
Well, if Councillor Wadsworth could provide evidence of email correspondence, we would have a look at that, but officers saying there's nothing to go by. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just on that point, with respect, Councillor Wadsworth isn't here to answer for himself one way or the other as to whether he's requested a meeting with the developers. we're told an elected member has made a request directly of developers. I think we're entitled to trust that an elected member has made such a request directly of developers. It's not a material point in any event, but I think we ought to be cautious not to cast aspersions on any elected member of this council. Thanks, Chair.
Don't feel that we are, Councillor Cohen. I've received email from Councillor Westwood and this application. He never mentioned that to me in any corresponding either. So I'm not saying he did or he didn't with officers. What I'm saying is officers says that they haven't received any. And today is the day of the decision and he's not here to clarify it. So I'm afraid I won't postpone the meeting until any time. So, sorry? Yeah, when we do is 3 minutes, we might have some clarification in that. Councillor Collins.
Chair, I've just thought, could I also ask the objectors, is it the materials you don't like? I mean, if the applicant was to go away and come back with a two-storey design that was in stone, more in keeping with the current buildings, would that be acceptable? Would that be better? Because looking at the drawings of the building as it exists at the moment, it doesn't look to my untrained eye that it was all built as that in one go. There do look to be other bits and pieces added on, but they're less intrusive to the eye because they're actually in natural materials. What would your opinion be if the applicant changed the materials rather than the mirrored glass, if he had something else?
I'll take that first. And
I am not taking sides on any side, but I would like to say this is only 2 residents. There's a lot of residents. You're asking 2 residents if they would like it. So is these 2 residents speaking for the community? That's what I'd like to say. Please.
that is a very fair point. And so we can only adduce what they may say, but we can only say what we believe is the case. And that's a very fair point, Chair. The fact is that historically, there was only ever a ground floor, and that was a fact. That was, as you all know, was an error in the previous planning application where the planners actually had implied that there was a first floor when there was not one. So in fact, what the community wants is basically the floor plan as it is now, which is a ground floor only. If it came up with a design which happened to have some glass in it, I can't speak as to whether the community would like that, but it's the extra floor which doesn't currently exist and never has existed, which is actually what got most people upset.
There's a particular problem here, and you can see from the photograph in front of you, that flat roofed extension is in front of the building line. Now, if it was behind the main house, then it would be much less obvious, but it's right in front, and from the majority of the park, then it really stands out, which is why a second floor is particularly objectionable. And there was a Victorian Conservatory there in front, and that is a very light looking building and fitted perfectly. And you may have seen photographs of it. But well, you can see there, the single story extension looks actually quite dominating, but that's 1960s, and the 1960s, no one liked Victorian buildings. But another similar size on top, it would just dominate.
I'll just add one more thing, because obviously you've got a limited amount of time. Whilst the tower, which you can see on that picture, is not to everybody's taste, it is part of the building, and that will be obscured by another floor. Simple as that.
I'll take one more question. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, my question to you, I'd like some clarification, because you're saying where the PVC porch is the front of the building.
No, it's the other side.
This is the back of the building. Okay, so the car park to the park is the front of the building. Right. Okay, so so your objection then is to the extension to the first floor. So you have no objection then to the basement.
No, I mean, that could be kept. I mean, it's not brilliant, but it could be kept because it's lower down, and therefore, though it is a bit dominant, it isn't in the same way that adding a floor would make it.
So you're saying that the extension is the front of the building, but to us, it's only at the rear, the side. It's at the side as far as we can see, but you're saying it's the front. Because at this moment in time, when I went and visit this morning, it was introduced to me, and when I walked down to the play area, it's the side of the building. You're saying it's the front of the building, so I'm getting a bit confused.
The confusion arises because of the change of the use, as Councillor Collins has actually said, the change of the use. There was the original traditional front, and then the entrance to the one-stop shop, which the shot was up here, actually became used by people as the front. And you walk down it towards the library on one side, building on the left, and it's that extension there which dominates, which is the one which people are objecting to.
Chair, could I just intervene just briefly? I understand why the question was asked as to whether the two gentlemen at the top representing the community would actually support this if the upper section was removed. And actually, in essence, the answer to that was yes. However, Carol was very careful in her presentation to mention that principally the objections were to do with the first floor extensions. Actually, looking through the objections that I've got in front of me here, even from the Ayrburgh Civic Society, which they're representing, they have concerns about the existing extension to be removed as well. So we just have to be a little bit careful with this, because regardless of what might be said by the two gentlemen here, there are other objections that relate to things like the car park going onto the grassed area as well. So whatever is said here wouldn't necessarily remove all of the objections to this. It removes the main one, but not all of them. I just want to be absolutely clear on that.
Okay, thank you both. We now have Nick Gallester who would like to speak in favor of the application. Nick, could you please come to the table? Nick, you have 4 minutes.
Hello, hi there. My name is Nicholas Gallagher. I'm uniquely the applicant, the project designer and the developer all in one. I'm here today to explain why I passionately feel the scheme before you should be approved. When I first put pen to paper and did the design, I did it to deliver a high quality scheme that sets the bar far higher than other developments in terms of the retention and restoration of the full building, and not just bits in it that the public see. But this comes at a financial cost. And to do this, the optimum design needs to reflect the number of units needing to be achieved. The massive benefits to the whole building by this approach outweigh small elements of the design, which may be subject to personal views. This way of approaching this project generates far higher levels of retention and restoration across the full building. The focus in recent months has been on the extension to the rear. Having read the objections, these mainly come down to personal views on design taste. What is it architecturally exciting to one person may not be to another, and vice versa. The principles of the concept fundamental to its overall success, whether the person likes it or not. The proposal to extend the extension to create a first floor has a purpose beyond just creating an extra bedroom. The tower, along with the 1960s extension, is a complex and expensive section of building to restore. Do we seal it up and accept nothing can be done with it? No, I don't think so. I passionately believe that we as designers have to find a solution and embrace ideas to give something purpose. By adding the first floor extension, it gives the tower and its staircase a purpose, a use, sustainability by using the existing staircase to reach the first floor. The benefits of the first floor extension are linked to the original principles of this design to restore this building throughout to a high level and not just the parts of it that the public see. It would be incredibly sad to cut back the level of restoration because potentially a unit has been wiped from the scheme. Conservation is where we as a society accept changes are needed and necessary, but not necessarily our own personal taste. But the benefits in granting permission here today extend far beyond the small extension to benefit the whole of the building. Being the developer and the designer gave me a unique perspective from the first day I sat down and sketched my ideas. My combined experience allowed me to design a scheme which works to deliver the high quality, highly restored building that no other scheme can deliver, because we have reached the edge of optimum layout versus commercial viability. Some comments have suggested the extension should be clad and finished in stone to match the historic buildings, but this would be considered confusing the readable history of the building too perfectly. The alternative is to use modern materials and the way we've put forward here today. I personally, having designed the extension, feel passionate about the use of mirror. Mirror is a material that changes in different light at different times of the year. It's also very sculptural and an artistic material. People look at architecturally mirrored objects throughout their lives and interpret the visual curiosity differently. It creates intrigue. It also creates debate and conversation. And that's one of the great fascinating things that mirrored buildings do. Although I disagree with the objector's personal views, it shows whatever the material used, some will like it and some will not. But mirror, unlike non-reflective materials, is immersive, architectural and sculptural. And it delivers a highly interesting concept, unlike solid materials. And that's why it works so well on this building. I've seen a Facebook campaign in the Rawdon group to drum up objections to the extension, but having read all the comments, there are 113 positive likes and comments in support of the extension against only 29 negative likes and comments. In the democratic world we live in, I feel this is important to mention to the committee when balancing the decision here today. I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Cohen and then Councillor?
Thanks. Just a really simple question. What's the maintenance arrangements to make sure that this mirror stays looking good? Clumsily phrased, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, overall, what we do on a development like this is everybody pays a small amount every month into a pot. And then what we do is we have a management team that'll look after the building. So any issues that come up with anything, the proportion works to be done to it to keep it up to a standard.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Some people have shown or stated that they're concerned about the children's playground. So how much of the mirror is actually mirrored window and how much of it is just a cladding? That's my first question. And I'm just curious, do you know what the tower was originally used for then? If you're saying it's not needed from the rest of the building, was it just a folly or was it?
Yeah. But yes, I think it's right. It was a watchtower. It was somewhere you could just go up and sit in a little area and I'll have a look across the rolling hills. Probably a status of wealth and grandeur at the time. Why not have one? And in answer to your other question, only the windows that are on there as you look at it now will be windows. There's no additional windows. So it's not like the whole thing is translucent. It's just the areas which are windows now stay as windows.
What about the first floor, the new bit?
On the first floor, there are two windows on the side on one of the drawings, but they're narrow and they will be obscured. And on the front, there is just a double door set, again obscured. So it doesn't, on the first floor, it doesn't have a lot of windows. It's more snippets of lights.
Councillor Anderson.
It's about the materials. Now, I'm not asking you to disclose pound, shilling and pence. I'm old enough to remember when that was the currency of this country.
Really old, Barry. I don't remember that.
But what sort of multiplier are we talking about in comparison with your proposed mirror to if it was to be done in stone, more reflective of what sort of multiplier are we talking about in terms of an increase in cost?
Yes, the mirror is not the cheap option. I originally, when I sat down and did the original design for this, wanted to use mirror right from the beginning. It's my company, it's me. I passionately pick mirror because I believe it works. It's not the cheap option. And extending it all the way down to the bottom, it isn't. It would be much easier and cheaper to flatten it, build it out of stone and back up. A fraction of the cost, probably. It's either way, it's expensive, but it's not the cheaper option. And it comes with complications to get it perfectly right that you don't see. And mirror is one of those things where when it's applied to the building, you apply it in such a way where all the detail that holds it is all hidden behind. And that hiding of it is the thing that costs the money. It's thousands. It's into thousands to do that right. It's certainly in excess of into the tens.
Any more questions? Councillor Ray.
So just to pick up on Councillor Anderson's question, so and it just goes to we'll call it the folly of the tower. In that sense, you say no, the material itself is probably more expensive. Are we saying that it's cheaper than actually having to maintain the tower separately and all the complications? Because that's obviously one of the arguments that's been put forward to us, that actually including that tower is an important element because of the complications around cost and ownership and maintenance. So are you saying to us, yes, the material is what it is, but actually it's still overall cheaper than having that being dealt with separately?
That's correct. Essentially, if you don't put something on the roof and do something with that staircase, you've got this humongous staircase that goes up, and it's what do you do with it? How much you're going to have to think about putting money into something where you're not going to get it back. And there's two elements. The second element is sustainability is best achieved through use, and it's just not good practice. It's not good in my book to try and close something off and say, well, we'll put a door on there and every now and again we'll go in and have a look. It's not me. No.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Anderson.
Is there a carbon benefit one way or the other in terms of the proposals? You know, if you take the cost, you know, have you carried out any carbon calculation? Because it's something as a council we are taking more and more interest in. Has there been a carbon calculation between the two alternatives?
The short answer is no, we haven't. In terms of obviously using the mirrored material and the way it's attached to the building brings opportunities to that existing building to insulate it at the same time. So there is a benefit there. Definitely, if you would just keep that building as it is, it's more problematic. You still inevitably end up doing something to the outside, but in terms of reducing carbon from using less heating to heat it, certainly by applying the mirrored cladding, it offers an opportunity to insulate the building. Definitely.
Councillor Collins, and this will be the last question.
Thank you. Thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
it's okay.
Yeah. The objectors mentioned that if you just took that current extension off and reduced the number of flats, it might make it less viable, but would be better for the building. I'm not commenting on that. But I'm just curious. I mean, it does sound like you are putting back some features that have been lost. So I'd just like you to take the opportunity to tell us, you know, what are you doing to restore this building? I mean, what are the benefits to the community regarding this building as a subsequent, as the consequence of having this extension? It's just giving you the opportunity to show that you're committed.
I think that's a really important question, actually. Because some of the benefits of this, the level that we've gone to are, for instance, those two ornate windows that are there, they're in bad condition. And the word that's been talked about in terms of them has been restoration and restore. Now, them windows are made from acid-edged glass using specialist pigments that are made from stuff like arsenic and things like that, which you can't use anymore. There is only a handful of people that are in the country that can put the colours back on glass and put it back together. that's extremely expensive, into the tens of thousands to fix the windows alone on just those. And that is something that I've agreed with planning officers that we will be undertaking. It's not a small item. Other things in there, we've gone round and looked at every fireplace with planning officers. All the fireplaces that are in there, just a little touch, will be restored, kept. That there is a mountain of little bits and pieces, down to radiator grills that were made to go around the pelmets. All of those are to be retained, taken out, sandblasted, resprayed and fitted back in so that they're all in keeping. Down to doors, skirting boards, you name it, the original 2 doors, which are not on the, you can't see them in a minute, they're not on the inside, they're actually in storage in the basement. They're to be restored and to go back. There's a list of, and including the windows that are in there at the moment, are windows that we're probably putting in that in the 80s and 90s. They're single casement windows. They're not the original windows, and the plan is to replace them with the original small sectioned windows as per the original design. But there is about 60 or 70 windows in there, all have to be handmade and go back in. Again, we haven't skimped on the obligations that we said that we'd undertake if we did this project, but those things come at a cost. As I said, it's my passion is this, and I don't want to do something that's less than the full thing and say, right, well, we can lose a unit over there, but we'll have to cut back on all this, because I think it's better to have the full package to repair and restore everything that's possible. And yes, it's a small extension on the back, and it'll always be interpreted how people look at it. But that's the great thing about architecture. It opens the opportunity up for the building to be restored in a way that I don't think any other scheme could. And the ceilings as well.
Say the last one, but you did put your hands up.
Yeah, I've got 2 points through you, Chair. On paragraph 20, the last statement says the removal of the existing ramps into the building is not acceptable by the council's access officer. Could you comment on that objection? And the second point is going back to the offer of a meeting. Did you have an offer of a request for a meeting, and was there a reason why it didn't happen?
In terms of the access ramp, we're limited on how far we can go with the car park. There is a red line that was defined before my involvement in the project, when it went to public consultation, I believe, through where they decided that the line was going to be on the title once it's sold. And that therefore means that you can only put the cars up to a point and work it backwards. It's fixed. So that means that the ramp that was, is there, is essentially, it's in the way, because you would have to extend further into the car park. Or the other side is that you go further that way, or people put the cars into the public car park, and that has more side effects than restoring the front to its original view when it didn't have the ramp. And we actually believe that the original stone steps are underneath the ramp at the front. It's probably been built around and then concreted in. And sorry, and on your second point, I've never been contacted by anybody to have a meeting, ever.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hamilton is.
When I was there was 2 ramps, so it's just the front ramp that will be removed. What about the ramp around the back opposite the library?
They're both to be removed. The one to the back, it becomes in an area which is a private garden. So the ramp form is removed and then forms 2 steps out of some doors.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. We'll now move to questions to the officers. So could we ask the highways officers and other officers to just move across to the table?
Should we do the question to Phil Ward about laws?
Yeah, I've got it on my list when the officers, when the officers move.
Phil, do you want me to go first? I'll set the framework and then.
Please introduce yourself. You didn't.
Hello, I'm John Booth. I'm a Principal Highways Officer for Leeds City Council.
Is that on? Susie Watson, Senior Planner in the Northwest team.
So, Nikki, you want to?
I think earlier when the speakers were making their submissions, there was a question by Councillor Burke about the planning laws and why they considered it breached. Obviously, they have submitted their own evidence through a particular company in terms of their analysis under the heritage merits for this application. But the report that's before you sets out the legislative framework. It's set out in paragraphs 52 and 53. Section 62 of the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990 sets out that duty, and that duty is having regard to the listed building and its importance and having special regard. So you as a decision maker must have special regard as to whether when you grant planning permission that it affects its building, its structural and its setting, that you have special regard to the desirability of preserving that building and or its setting and the features that it retains and has that are of special architectural and historic interest. Now that's set out for the listed building, but then also equally to that is the duty under section 72 in relation to conservation areas as well. And that test is slightly different. It's about special attention to preserving and enhancing the character and appearance of that area. Now you as a decision maker have got a report that has been presented to you, which the officers have carried out detailed analysis on the development. They've carried out what they consider in their planning balance that these tests are met. I mean, it is a high bar. By no means you are aware that this is a high bar, and it's highly important that you, in your considerations, consider that as to whether this development meets this legal test. And you've had special regard and special attention to that. And in addition to that, the National Planning Framework, Chapter 16, deals with all of these aspects of heritage, and that's also included in your report. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Phil, who can further develop that point from an expert officer position.
Yes, thank you. I think the only thing I would add there is that case law has established that the meaning of the word preserve, it was used several times, is equal to or means cause no harm. So if the development is thought to cause no harm, it preserves the special interest of the listed building, the special interest being the elements of significance, and therefore passes the test, if you like, under the provisions of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt, and this is from a non-expert view, but just to be absolutely clear on this, from members' perspective, actually what was suggested was that we had contravened the law. That's not the case, because this is a matter of interpretation and opinion as to how you interpret the legislation. That's what Nikki's saying in a nutshell. So that's in front of you. So as council officers, we have interpreted it, and that's what's presented to you in the report. Urban Glow, who of course were appointed by Airbus Civic Society, have a different and contrary view. The key thing I would make to you now is that actually Urban View, in their own documentation, have concentrated on the first floor extension. What the officers are bringing to you is actually all the material considerations in terms of our interpretation and opinion of what is the law. And as Phil has just said, there is case law too to back that.
May I just say one more thing? Yes, National Planning Policy Framework says that if it's considered that there is harm, we need to balance that against securing securing public benefits, including the optimum viable use for the building. So if the use is thought to be the optimum viable use, residential use, and this development secures that use, that needs to be balanced against any harm caused to the rest of the building.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Can I just ask three questions, I suppose, which you'd be pleased to know a lot about the extension. One relates to security. Now, the drawings show us that to the rear of the building, there appears to be security features, i.e. a fence and a gate. The front of the building, we've got flats effectively straight out onto the car park area, which is a public space. And I've also got some concerns about the basement flat, which again seems to be accessible to the public. So I just wondered if we'd looked at that and if any comment had been made about security. You mentioned that there's a small area of amenity space. Well, actually, it's so small, it's not really worth calling that. It's just a bit of grass. What normally, as that's effectively contrary to policy, have we asked or are we asking for some compensatory amenity space or contribution to effectively overcome that shortfall? And the last question is the question I asked on site this morning about the basement flat and where the bedrooms are. So that's my three questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, in terms of security and fencing, I think we've got a condition on the actual scheme, condition number 8, which is asking for details of boundary treatment. I think in relation to the scheme, we've concentrated on getting the listed building right, getting the works to the inside and the outside of the listed building right, including the extension, and matters such as the boundary treatments for security, I suppose, have been put a bit on the back burner. So it would be something that, although Susie's putting her hand up, so she might be able to tell me something a little bit more about that.
I was just going to say that to the front to the car park is going to be railings around there. That's going to have a painted metal railing around it. I think the part of the reason for the condition is we just wanted to make sure, because some areas of timber were proposed at the rear that were quite high, whether that was the most appropriate solution for the listed building. So it was to just give us a chance to look at that in more detail.
Sorry, just to add, there's also railings above the retaining wall to the lower section, the flat that has the amenity space that faces, and let's get the orientation right, which would be called the rear, I think. Not right, the right direction, you know what I mean, don't you? In the garden that I walked down today, there are railings to that flat, where the bedrooms are that Carol's going to refer to, so it has got railings around it.
You asked the question about the basement on site this morning. I had a look at the basement floor plans. The flat number 1, which has the extension, will have 2 bedrooms in the basement, but its main living space is on the ground floor and then the bedroom on the first. There is one flat 8, where all of its rooms will go out into that area facing the retaining wall, but it's got its own private courtyard there. So the rooms will look out onto its own private amenity courtyard space, giving it some security and privacy. Finally, regarding green space, because it's only 8 dwellings, there doesn't need to be a green space contribution. So we're dealing with 2 separate policies, really. You have the green space policy, where they have to provide green space depending on how many properties it is, and it's beneath that threshold. Amenity spaces in neighbourhoods for living, where in neighbourhoods for living we ask for 25% of the floor space to be provided as amenity space. You know, we've made an assessment as officers that it doesn't meet that, but because it's so close to the park and because we're trying to get a viable scheme into a listed building and bring the listed building back into use, and you know, flat as 8 has a courtyard, flat number 1 has its little balcony area on the bedroom, that we consider it to be acceptable to not comply with neighbourhoods for living.
Councillor Collins. Mine?
Oh, I'm the chosen one. My mic's working. A question to highways. Because this is access from the main entrance in, and we visited this morning, the actual car parking spaces that are going to be public, the entrance in there is absolutely diabolical. So there's going to be more traffic coming into that. Has there been any discussions about developing what will be the public car parking spaces as opposed to the car parking spaces for the flats, because the owners of the flats are going to have to come in through that way?
My mic works too. We've not looked at that specifically, but in terms of traffic generation, this will generate less traffic, significantly less traffic than operating as an office. You know, to put that into some sort of context, we've got 16 car parking spaces in this development. An office of this sort of size would have a demand for parking of more than 30, depending on what the actual floor space that is used was. But typically for that size, it would be about 30 plus spaces.
There were 4 this morning.
Yeah, but that is, it's not in use at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, although this obviously is a reduction in the numbers that are likely to be using it, I think we noticed today, because those numbers are less, there's no real need to actually be widening or altering the access into the car park.
I'm not asking about the access into it. I'm asking about the actual road of the car park where people have got to come in and out. It's diabolical.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, the way the car park's laid out at the moment is that the vehicles to the public car parks are laid out on the periphery, so there would be a clear way through the middle to the access to the flats car parking, which will be retained as it is, but it's also outside the applicant's boundary, because that still would lie with the city council.
Has there been any discussions with the developer that he might look at resurfacing that car park?
It doesn't own it, councillor.
He doesn't, but he might look on us as a gift.
Councillor Reagan.
Can I just confirm that would not be a material consideration?
Right. Councillor Collins, are you back with us now?
Yes, I'm back. I was really pleased to hear from the applicant about the features he was actually going to retain within the building. I hadn't really considered before just how many things he was going to restore and put back. The listed building situation at the moment, usually listed buildings give you a list of things that are key to be retained. I just wondered whether that listed building list or whether there's going to be a review of that after the work has been done, because I'm just thinking that if the applicant is taking care to put a fireplace back together or some coving back in, if that's not in the listed building list, then it could be that future owners take it out again. I'm just wondering whether there is an opportunity to make sure that all of these features that are being restored are actually preserved for the future.
Yes, good question. I think the first thing to remember is that list descriptions are there to identify buildings, not to say what's important about them. Yeah, although sometimes they do So it suggests that these things are of significance, that they're not meant to be an inventory of all the features, a full inventory of all the features. Secondly, I'd make the point that, of course, we're approving plans and that will be a record of the building. So we'll know what was there and what's been added. To update the listing would mean an application to Historic England, which would cost us money, unless the applicant wants to make that application to review the building afterwards.
Just come back, Chair. I did own a pub that was listed. And it did have a list of things that we'd got to retain. Even the MDF bar had to be retained. So are you saying that's unusual then? That
No, it's not unusual, but in law, list descriptions are there primarily to identify the building. So we know which the listed building is and how extensive the listed building is. They do sometimes indicate some features of interest, but it's not exhaustive. So the fact that something isn't mentioned doesn't mean that it's not listed or considered to be part of the listed building. Identifying what is significant is, if you like, my job. Keeps me in a job. It's my discretion.
Chair, can I? Oh dear, I thought I'd been cut off. Chair, just to make it clear, I think what Phil was trying to say towards the end of what he was saying, that in essence, the features, the drawings are detailed internally. So ultimately, if anything else starts to go missing or amiss, it is an enforcement issue for us to pursue by our enforcement team.
Councillor Anderson.
I've got a number of questions. It's mainly just to satisfy me. So we can start with, well, the first one is on car parking. The council have a stated objective to try and get people to use parks and green spaces more. So what sort of capacity would a park of that size need in terms of car parking when you compare it with other car parks throughout the city? Secondly, how many visitor spaces have you got? And if you've not got visitor spaces, where do you expect visitors to park at any one time? In terms of where the parking arrangements are going to be for there, is there going to be any need to block off any of the public car parking spaces to enable to get clear access for the residents at that particular point? And also, where the refuse vehicles are going to be going, is there any potential conflict between the movement of the refuse vehicle, where the refuse vehicle will need to stay, and pedestrians, etc., so that it's laid out properly? And some of us know, unfortunately, that when the refuse vehicle feels it can't access something, it just doesn't bother picking the bins up, it just disappears. So, you know, is that a risk? So that's on the highway side. On the materials side, was there ever any discussions with the developer about trying to come up with a different type of material to be used other than the mirrors? Along the lines of the question I was asked about, you know, was it going to cost any more? Were discussions taking place? And then the final one is to Mr. Ward, where Heritage England have said, refer to you. What was, I mean, you're obviously not going to know exactly what was behind it from their point of view, but what is your view? Because they've said, refer to you. Can you be explicit in your views to us? Not why they've referred to you, because you've got no way of knowing why they made that comment in reference to you, but what are your specific comments about the heritage impacts of this development?
Go in order how you ask highways members. So highways, could you answer it first?
Thank you. With reference to the park and the car parking, we've not done any specific calculations to determine what it would be for this park, as it, you know, because it's existing, and the spaces that will be allocated to the residential would have been part of the office that was there anyway. But Leeds City Council don't have a specific parking standard for parks. Car parking standards are usually related to an element of development.
Just help on that little point as well, because I'm not sure how helpful the question is in a way, simply because, as we said before, the previous use would have had more intensive use of the car park. So I think the key element to remember here is that the conversion will reduce the demand upon the existing public car park.
This is an example of where Leeds City Council have a policy to improve the uses of green space, which has come after the office space. We are, as a council, trying to get people to use green spaces more. We are trying to get people out more. We are trying to get children to use play areas more, which will lead to more chances of pedestrian traffic and cars coming and going. And also, if you look at the site as well, there are already some car parking spaces, currently residents only. It looks like there's some housing at the side that's already there. The library are bound to have some spaces set specifically aside for them so that they can get disabled people, etc., in and out. So we should be having a comprehensive policy. I'm not for 1 minute saying that we need vast more spaces. I'm just asking, have the council carried out this, or have you just thought, well, taking the view that Mr. Butler's made, that the office use was X beforehand, so as long as it doesn't exceed that. But you need to speak to parks. What are their ambitions in terms of that? Because that's one of the stated ambitions of this council. Maybe planning don't like that one.
Councillor Anderson, we do understand. We are into environment and we do support the environment. So we are encouraging individuals to walk, less use of cars. This is what we are doing. So I don't know what you're really asking for, what the council to put in place.
Well, because with the greatest of respect, this council's ambition to get people to walk more is not going to happen in the outer areas. Whether they can have as many ambitions as they like.
I'm sorry, Councillor Anderson. I think this is not the old case.
I am trying to ascertain whether or not there are any. Point of order on what basis?
Councillor Anderson, can I finish? This is not just down to the council. This is down to each and every one of us to take responsibility for our health, walk more, drive less. You know that. So please, we are discussing an application that come back to the table. This is not what the council to put in or not to put in. You are straying away from this. I'm sorry, Councillor Anderson.
Just to try and help, I think John actually did answer the question. Simply that I understand. No, sorry, I understand why Councillor Anderson raised the question, but John did answer the question that there isn't actually a car parking ratio that they have adopted for parks. Right. Also, Councillor Taylor, the chair, is correct in that there are conflicting policies, of course, because I understand what you're saying about the outer areas and people having a desire to use the cars more, perhaps. But also the council is obviously trying to get people out of the cars and to be more sustainable. So I think this particular question is something to be dealt outside of the meeting. John understands the point about whether there needs to be a ratio, whether that can be taken forward by John to the senior officers or members do that separately. I think it is a question outside of this meeting because we can't actually alter the car parking requirements within this meeting. The simple point I was trying to make was just to remind members that despite all of those things, actually this scheme has less demand upon the car park than the original one did. That's all.
And this, but I'm going to divide and move on to the officer
Yeah, I mean, he did have some other IRA questions, which were the visitor spaces and how the refuge vehicles will work, which I'm sure John can answer.
When you made reference to visitor spaces, I assume you mean visitors to the flats?
Yes.
Yes, the parking standards allow for that. In this area, we have an expected number of parking spaces, and this development is complies with those standards, which include 4 visitor spaces. So visitors would be expected to use the car parking allocated to the flats. Refuse vehicles, yes, I was just I was looking. I've got blocking off public spaces. There's no intention. It's the residential parking is accessed through the car park, but there's no. I don't think there's any intention there to block off any of those existing spaces outside of their parking area. And the refuse vehicles, again, they will access the refuse area through the car park. There'll be an expectation that they'll turn around, drive in forward, turn around, empty the bins, and then drive back out again.
If you remember from the site plan, the actual bin store will be on the side of the building, adjacent to the parking. So it's not hidden away round the other side. It should be quite accessible for the refuge vehicles to get to. You moved on to the different materials. I mean, there's been lots of discussions about what materials to use on the extension and the existing. And I think the conclusions that we've all come to is that the mirrored one is that we're bringing to you today. And that's the one that we're sort of wanting a decision on, really. And that's the material that you've got in front of you at the moment to consider.
What is my view? I'll address the general conversion, if you like, of the building to residential use. Earlier, I mentioned this, introduced the concept of optimum viable use, which is a public benefit in the NPPF. And I'm making assumption one that residential use is in this area is probably, for this building, is probably the only viable use. The building was somewhere else. We might think of other uses such as office use, but I think that's unlikely here. And then there are 2 parts: is the optimum use, and secondly, is this the optimum solution for the building? So if we've established that this is the only viable use. Is it the optimum use of the building? And I can be sure that the developers tried very hard to minimise the impact on the interior of the building. It's quite remarkable, actually, how undisturbed the existing plan form of the building is. There are some new partitions, but they are in the secondary rooms and not in the principal rooms, which will remain very much as they are. So just to underline what I said before, I consider the conversion is the optimum viable use, which needs to be considered as a public benefit to weigh against any harm. One element harm is the truncation of the secondary staircase. I don't know if you saw the staircase this morning. There's what you might call a servant staircase, which will be sliced off to introduce more flats. So let's, if you like, let's turn to the main event, the extension. I've read all the objections actually, and they seem to come down to 2 things which we've already touched on, and that is the addition of a second story to the existing extension, the 1960s extension, and the second issue is the, if you like, the design, particularly the use of mirrored cladding. Can I have slide 31, please? Yeah.
Direct question to those places. I've actually multiple slides around myself as a specific.
Right. Can I have slide 31, because I think that will be useful in the discussion. So I'll comment on the extension by addressing the objections, and on the height, the concern is that the existing extension, right, that one there, existing extension is harmful, and therefore doubling its height, I suppose, will be doubly harmful. And that's true. If you were just simply sort of stacking that on top of that, it would result in a very blocky and lumpen form, which would be at odds with the existing soaring Gothic gables that you can't see on this slide. But that's not what's proposed, is it? The new extension is setting, I suppose, by a quarter of the depth of the existing extension, and it's concave. So if we draw a section that way, the new extension, I think, sort of mediates between that extension and the existing building. I actually think that's an improvement on the existing condition because of that step. It's stepping back from the existing extension like that. If you take a section that way, the new extension is actually set below the eaves of the existing building. Yeah, so it steps that way as well. Yeah, so if you consider it in 2 dimensions like that, I think the extension is an improvement on the existing extension. The second point is the design, I suppose. There's been a lot of talk about the materials, and the use of mirrored glass is certainly striking. What it will do, it will dematerialize the planes of the building through the reflections, but it will also give quite a strong sculptural form if you can hold those two things together. But what I think it will do is produce a visually lightweight building compared with the existing building, so it will be subordinate that way. I still haven't answered the question actually. Will it preserve the building, which I need to, but a few more things I need to say before I answer that, because I think these are material. The visuals, could we see one of the visuals showing the mirrored glass, please?
The next one will probably do it. No.
Yeah. Next one, please.
No, go back.
Not that one. Can we see it from the front? Yeah, there we are. This is what I call the front, by the way. Architecturally, that's the front because it's addressing the grounds of the house. But 2 things to note. Well, one thing to note actually. This is shown as a seamless, sort of reflective building. In reality, I think that the window openings here, the reveals of the window openings will be in different materials as some of the examples shown, and there also have to be a capping. And I think that's very important. I think it's a positive thing because it will give scale to the building. Yeah, because there'll be implied openings. There'll also be a capping, which I think will tend to bring the extension in line with the building. The scale, the proportions of these implied openings will, to use upon, mirror the existing building. So to wash up, I think that this extension will at least preserve the listed building. I think the massing and form of the extension will help this existing building to step back to the existing building. It won't appear to be as aggressive because it's stepping back because of this extension. I think the use of reflective materials will produce a lightweight foil to the existing building, and I think the implied openings and the other trims will give it a scale that is in harmony with the existing building. And I think it will, this might split the audience, produce a visually alluring addition to the listed building.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Anderson? Councillor Hamilton.
Oh, thanks, Chair. My question is regarding the back page of our document. With regards to, I just want to get this car parking clear up in my mind. So it's set out beautifully on here, I must say. So I just want to ask, is there going to be a demarcation line for the residents separate to because on here we've in front of the house, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 car parks there. So is that going to be just for the residents? And then the rest will be used for the public park and the library and what was it? Yeah, the library that was there. So as the residents, because we don't want the residents to come and can't park because they live there. And then Mr. Brown want to go to go into the park rather than walk. You know, he wants to park his car. So I just want to just understand, will there be a clear mark so that the residents use their as parking space separate from the member of the public going to the park? Because it's beautiful on here, you know, up the park like this.
Lewis, before we answer that question, would it be helpful if we could have slide 19 on the screen, please? Yeah, so this is the site plan that you've seen earlier and you've got in your packaging. So yes, there will be boundary treatment along here, railings, I think Susie said, didn't you, and a gate to get so that car parking area will be demarked off. Susie, do you know what's happening with these spaces for visitors, or are they for people in the park? The
dark grey ones to the library side, they are outside of the red line, but there are on the lighter grey near the tower element, there are 2 off-street parking spaces in there for the flat one that utilises the tower.
Right. So as I understand it then, so these spaces and these spaces are for the flats and they will be partitioned off so they can't be used, gated so they can't be used, and then they're putting some ones in there for other people to use.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Sorry, Chair, just a clarification on that then. So the ones to the north of the top of the picture that are labelled visitor parking, there's 3 of them that are outside the red line. Are you saying that people visiting the park can actually park there?
Yes, they're outside the red line. Yeah. Yes.
Anybody?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Susie, Susie's the case officer that dealt with the application. Those 3 parking spaces are actually outside any of the gated elements. So flat 1 has its own private gated parking. The flats to the other side have the gated access, but those 3 spaces that have just been referred to, can we just be clear who has access and use of those, please?
The public.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the panel understood that that wasn't actually part of the application. Thank you.
Councillor Cohen?
Yeah, it just for the, I think my eyesight is really shocking. I think they say visitor parking on them. Yeah. I think actually that is with greatest respect a little bit misleading. It might have been better to say public parking, because it's not really visitor parking would suggest it's something retained within the red line. I just suggest that for the future. Park visitors.
To make it simple, just don't put anything.
Well, they're suggesting that they're included within the proposed parking, aren't they? Because it was before.
Well, no.
Because we were told there were 3. We were told there were 3 parking spaces, Councillor Hamilton.
No.
Oh, it's what we were told.
Hey, you two, there's not 2 meetings, it's 1 meeting. And I'm sure the officers already answered. And Councillor Cohen, you're quite right to highlight that, and I'm sure that will be addressed. Thank you. 2 comments. Are there any other? Is it a comment, Councillor Cohen?
Chair, you said comments. I wouldn't dare disagree with you. I was ready to comment.
Oh, thank you.
May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you,
It's
Chair.
just that your hand raised so fast.
Quick off the mark. Thank you, Chair. It would seem to me that fundamentally the real issue with this from a planning perspective is actually the material being used on the development. I appreciate that local residents, some may have concern about the second story, but in terms of viability and the benefit that that brings, I think that would be hard to argue against on planning terms. The material, unquestionably, it would seem from a listed status, causes harm. And therefore, what we've been told is we have to weigh up whether that harm, which I would submit, it would almost certainly be regarded as a harm from a listed perspective, whether that harm outweighs the benefit that the development undoubtedly causes. And it would seem to me that's fundamentally the major decision we need to make. And I'm really struggling.
Can we have a pause there while the officer just clarified this section? You want to clarify something?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, and I do apologise, Councillor Cohen. By the way, I accept the point about the reference to visitor car parking. I apologise for that on the drawings. It wasn't the officers that have suggested this causes harm. It was Urban Glow that suggested it caused harm.
If I may, Chair, the legal officer and indeed the council officer talked to us about the tests we look at. We're told that with listed buildings, one of the things was whether harm was caused to the building. That was one of the tests, and it was one of our officers that told us that, and he just nodded. I have to say, Chair, it's rare that when councillors come to the comments section, the officers start to interject at that point. This is our point to give our opinions, whatever they may be. That's the point of the comments section. We've heard what officers say, and we now apply that, and that's what I'm doing. I'm really struggling here because this is a listed building which demands protection. Equally, to not bring this building back into use is bordering on criminal, because it needs to be brought into use. It's bringing housing to the area. But I very much sympathise with residents who say that this material makes it look like something of a carbuncle, because that's my personal view. I struggle with that. So I'm struggling here. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to sort of build on the point from Councillor Cohen, but design is subjective and buildings aren't frozen in time. And if they are frozen in time, we wouldn't have some of our grandest, most important buildings in this country because they would have never have been amended or adopted. I think actually what the legal officer and the heritage officer has actually said is it is a test, but our heritage officer has said that on their opinion, they believe it enhances rather than actually causes harm. Now, of course, we can take a differing opinion, and that opinion is based on our own prejudices to a certain extent as to what heritage is and what design is. So fundamentally, by the sound of it, some of us are agreeing that there needs to be a viable scheme here, that with huge respect to the local residents, they are making a design opinion rather than necessarily a planning consideration, which we are here to do. We're not here to be popular. We're here to make decisions based on legislation and the needs of the area. We can design by committee to the end of the universe and never actually get to a decision, because in the end, we will all have differing opinions. And I think we just need to be honest. We have all seen historical restorations where a developer with the best of intentions has tried to mirror the existing building and has made such a terrible job of it, not out of the want to cause harm, because again, the stone's right, how it's weathered, modern techniques do not allow for that. And we have said at many a planning panel across this council that the decision sometimes we have to make on these is, actually, do we create something which is clearly modern, clearly new, and is clearly designed to be a statement, to be architectural, to be something that says think about the building? Or do we hope that we don't get another bodge job of a really poor restoration to a building, which we then all lament for decades and decades to come? And we have all had this conversation. So for me, you know, our Heritage Office says they do not believe it causes harm. The developer says action. I think we all agree, the passion of the developer, by the sounds of this, they really want to restore this building inside to its former glory. And what we have to decide, and it's not our personal prejudices on design, but actually, do we want to risk a bodged job by trying to make it match an old building, which we all know goes horribly wrong? Or do we want to actually say, actually, we want a high quality modern design, which actually makes it clearly part of the history of this building and the fabric of its future use, and of therefore for people to look back and say there was a history to this building. It's developed over time, like many of our great buildings in the city has. So on that basis, and I have actually sympathy for the residents to a certain extent, that they obviously live in this area, they like the area is, that any perceived amount of harm, and I personally don't think from an architectural point of view this is causing harm, but any perceived amount of harm is far, far outweighed by the sound of it, a very sympathetic, very understanding, and frankly, very expensive restoration of a building to its former glory internally. And I think by the sound of it, our Heritage Officer agrees with that interpretation as well. So on that basis, I will be supporting this.
Any other comments on that one? Fellow Councillor Campbell. Councillor Campbell?
I was expecting loads of other people to dive in before me. And no, I hadn't nodded off. You're right. I agree with just about 95% of what you've just said, actually. I think it's, you know, it's a valid point that people need to understand, isn't it? Is that this is, you know, planning is not a game show. It's not how many people vote for now, how many members of the public vote for and against. It's about planning law. We're tied by planning law, and we really must deal with this in terms of planning law. And I think we're trying to do that. And we get to this discussion about whether the extension is harmful to a listed building. Now, any extension by default is harmful to a listed building. And I was just actually, while you were arguing about the car parking, I was actually reading the listing. And this is, it's an unusual building, this, because actually if you look at the listing, it's got much more detail within it than I've ever seen on any listing in the area. And I sort of think to myself, if I was sitting on the plans panel in 1847 when they came along with the planning application to demolish the, no, it's the next one I was on, the 1662, we'd probably have said no to this because it's too fancy, it's too. And then we talk about the 1872 extension, which we're desperate to keep at the moment. But again, that was probably unpopular at the time. And I think it's fair to say that the bit of the extension that the City Council put on it would never have got through panel. Never, ever. Because it's just diabolical, really. It's an embarrassment to all of us. I think nobody's disagreeing about the principle of the use. Nobody's disagreeing about the view that the best way to keep this building going is to actually use it. The argument is, in many ways, about the argument about the wallpaper colour. Do we like what they're doing? Do they like what they're doing? If I'm honest with you, and it's a personal opinion, I do not like the mirror glass finish. I said on site, why didn't you just knock the extension down and come in with a new build? But the point you made is extremely valid. The last thing we need there is a pastiche of what's there already, because you could never do it as well as that, quite frankly. So we have to make it obvious that this is the extension. Now, I'm in two minds about voted for it because I do really think I really don't like the material. I really, really don't like it. And I think that I mean, I would be tempted to say, could we defer it and ask if the developer could look at knocking it down and building something that was obviously modern, but obviously not trying to cover up what is a pretty poor extension at the moment. Somebody's also touched on overlooking the playground. I have to say we were on site today, weren't we? And we were surprised how few houses overlook the play area. And it seems to me that if you actually get people in this building, they will overlook that play area. And that's a security aspect that I think we should support. So as I say, I'm almost tempted. Oh, well, why not? I'll do it. I'm tempted to say, could we defer this? Can I propose that we defer this for one cycle? Accepting the principle of the development for housing, accepting the principle that there will be an extension, but that we ask the developer to go and look at that again and in effect say, is it possible for you to take down that current extension, which is pretty poor, and replace it with one that is more appropriate to that location, albeit in a modern design? I'll propose that, Chair. That'll cause a bit of controversy.
We'll leave that on the table, but if you listen careful to what Councillor Ray just said, no, we're not going to propose it just yet because we haven't got the.
He's moved it, Chair. He has made.
So you have made the proposal?
Yeah, he has.
Sorry, I thought you saying.
Sorry, Chair. Take it on.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Campbell of Oxford proposal. What did you ask for, Councillor Campbell, for it to go away and we looked at it again and come back? Just clarify.
For the benefit of members, what I propose is we defer making a decision today. We accept the principle of the change of use or the restoration to residential. We accept the details, most of the details that have been outlined on the in the officer's report, but we express our concerns about the materials in particular of the proposed extension and new build, and ask if we defer we defer the decision for further discussions between the officers and the developer, who I have to say I'm impressed with the developer. I thought he was extremely passionate about that building. Sorry, that's an aside. Ask the developer if he'd like to look at that extension again with a view possibly to demolishing the existing extension and replacing it with a new build, which, though in modern in design, would perhaps better reflect the current listed building.
That's your proposal. Who second? Councillor Collins. I will ask for a vote in that. All those that agreed with Councillor Campbell's proposal, could you please raise your hand? Those against? Councillor Cohen as well.
Councillor Cohen, sorry, did you vote? So that's 5.
Raise your hand, I saw that, and I counted in the number, Councillor Cohen.
Sorry, at the moment, 2, 4 and 5 against. That's what I've recorded, 2, 4 and 5 against. So, and the rest abstentions. So that motion's not carried. Chair, can I just make another comment on this? Actually, that is precisely where we were at the end of the last panel. And the difficulty at the end of the last panel for me was, in terms of getting clarity for the developer, was it wasn't clear as to what has been referred to as a modern design was. And of course, there was an intervention, and ultimately there wasn't any clarity. So I just thought I needed to mention that.
Well,
So
quite frankly, Chair, just because Mr. Butler's grumpy because I don't agree with him, he's not a reason for him to interject at that point. Yes, we did say we didn't like the design last time, but what we're saying is what you've come back with, they still don't like.
Well, we don't need to, Chair. Sorry, Chair, I hadn't actually finished, to be honest with you, because then what lies in front of you, of course, is what's on the front sheet of the papers, or page 13 rather, which is a recommendation to grant permission subject to the following conditions. I just wanted, Chair, to just make a slight amendment to that, because there was a comment made by. Yeah,
we're not.
No, I just want to make it clear on what you're voting for, because.
We're not voting yet. We haven't reached that bit. Is there any other one with any comments? Oh, did she? Sorry, Councillor Burke, I didn't see you there. Councillor Burke?
Well, I think Councillor Ray said most of what I was going to say. It was just to build on, really, when I clarified the law with our colleague, and it was about balancing the harm against the potential benefits. I personally don't like the glass, the mirror, should I say. However, walking round inside that building brought it to life for me, and the fantastic features inside. I actually would like one of those flats myself, way beyond my reach. Yeah, well, if it was £3.50, then perhaps it'd be a possibility. But so whilst I think this could be a very circular conversation, and you could come back with a different material that we didn't like, or another material that we didn't like. And if I knew enough about materials, I'd mention some. However, I think in the balance and measuring, for me, the actual benefits to retaining those fantastic radiators, the ceilings, and actually bringing it back into use. I don't like the mirrors personally, but I think it outweighs, that harm outweighs anything else. So I'll be voting for it, and I propose we go to vote.
Still comment.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just not proposing.
I take it back.
She's proposing.
We will ask the, okay, we in comments finish. Can I suggest I ask the chief officer to sum up, and then
she has made a proposal for the officer's recommendation. I think as a matter of procedure, we are, as plans panel, we go through a process by which officers provide their responses to questions, and then there is an opportunity for you to provide your comments. There is a motion on the table for the officer recommendation, but Councillor Hamilton did have her hand up. So, but there is a material point that the officer would require clarification for you, so that if he may be given that opportunity, please, before the comment is made.
Chair, I'm sure Councillor Hamilton's comments are far more important than what I was going to say. So, Councillor Hamilton wants to make that comment, by all means, please do so.
Okay, my comment is I'm really glad I was able to attend the site visit today, because when it did come to us in March, we were all against it, and that's why we asked for it to be deferred. So this meeting start clashing with another meeting that I have, but today we didn't have one of those meetings. So I'm really pleased I went and I was able to see for myself. However, I'm no architect, but I think it's going to look really nice. And why I would support the extension above is due to the staircase, and that space will be used rather than be blocked off and left there as an empty space. So I will, when it's eventually finished, take a drive out and have a look, and hope I am not ashamed that I'm really pleased that I supported it, because I do that with quite a few building that we approve just to see the changes. So yeah, I'm happy to support this, because I would like that staircase and space to be used. That's what for me.
Thank you. Steve, would you?
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise for the earlier intervention. I think I just got carried away with myself. What I'd just like to say to members, obviously there are two votes, two applications here in effect, so we need to obviously consider both of them. But Phil Ward earlier from Conservation made a comment about the detailing of the joining of the glass, and that you would see some of the headers and all the rest of it. We haven't got the two-dimensional drawings yet that actually show that. So we can be absolutely certain of the detail, and we've concentrated, because it's been a difficult scheme, on getting the three-dimensional drawing so you could understand it a little bit better. So all I was going to suggest is the recommendation for both applications is changed slightly. So if members are minded to approve it, it's approved in principle but deferred and delegated to the Chief Planning Officer for the submission of the detailed elevations that show that treatment, and we'll obviously discuss that in conjunction with Mr. Ward and his conservation colleagues.
I'll propose that, Steve.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. We got proposer and a second. So all those in favor? Sorry, what? I did vote. Was against? Councillor Collins? 3. So that has been carried. Thank you.
Could we just sum up, because there are 2 applications that members have both voted on?
Yeah, just for absolute clarity. So members have voted and agreed that the change in recommendation on both applications, because we do need the detailing, although principally I suppose for listed building application, but both applications are approved in principle, but deferred and delegated to the Chief Planning Officer for submissions of the detailed elevational drawings, particularly with regard the first floor extension and cladding to the ground floor.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 8, which is date and times of the next meeting, the 22nd of January. So this just leaves me to say Merry Christmas all, and do hope you have a lovely time. Please be careful, keep your distance, wear your mask, please don't have unnecessary parties, and just have a lovely time, and Happy New Year when it do arrive. You did.